And they come here and tell us, these evangelists come around here and preach to the people. They call us Indian pagans. There never was such a thing as a pagan Indian. We all have breathed in the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of both, God in heaven. We all have breathed that. I was taught that from the time I was a little baby, little kid. And all these grand medicine people breathe with God. I can't understand why they come here and call us pagans. It's impossible for an Indian to be a pagan when they live right close to nature. Yeah, it's impossible.
She lived a really simple life and traditional life. She was a member of a respected family. She had a long lineage of many, many tribal chiefs. Every part of the land was respected. All of it was respected. It was a part of who they were as Anishinaabe people.
Well, they were better people than some of the Christians I know.
There we go.
Sorry about that.
Number 3, who will read that for me?
We were taught not to even mark the trees. They were put there by the Holy Spirit. The old people believed there was a spirit in everything. We lived by a creek. We were not allowed to throw anything dirty in the creek or on the lake shore. We were taught to have respect for water.
But they were called heathens and pagans. She lived also during the time when Congress had authorized the Commissioner of Indian Affairs to create legal rules that required Indian children to attend boarding schools. During these years, Indian agents forcibly abducted children as early as age 4 from their homes and enrolled them in Christian and government-run boarding schools. In 1902, my grandmother would begin her formal education in the first Minnesota Indian boarding school in White Earth. This was one of 16 boarding schools across the state of Minnesota. In 1902, the year she began, there was room for 102 students. Number 4.
I was 9 years old, and I was punished all the time. He used to put me in a corner. Why? Because I didn't know English. They'd ask me a question. I didn't answer. They thought I was stubborn. They put me in the corner. At the time, I didn't know they were punishing me. I didn't know one word of English.
My grandmother went on to say that sometimes we were strapped. We had to march in step. Everywhere we went, we had to be in line. It was like military school. Everything had to be on time. She was 9 years old. After a few years in White Earth, she moved on to another boarding school. This time it was in Pipestone, and it was the Pipestone Indian Trade School to finish her grade school education. She was only allowed to come home on extended holidays. My wife and I, we traveled to museums across the United States. We went to the Heard Museum in Arizona, Phoenix, and we went to the second floor, and there was this exhibit on boarding schools. We didn't know it was there. We just walked in, and it was powerful. It was extremely powerful. And pretty soon I could hear my wife saying, "Kent, come here." And as I maneuvered through this exhibit, I came to a room that was set up like a classroom. And all the native students all looked alike because all their hair was gone. They all looked alike. They were all wearing the same clothing, boys and girls. And my wife said, Kent, look there. A quote from my grandmother. I couldn't talk a word of English. All I talked was the Ojibwe language. Josephine Robinson, Ojibwe, Pipestone Indian School. We had no clue that that exhibit was even there. Her words, I had a tough time finishing and completing walking through that exhibit after seeing this. And I think that day, that statement spoke volumes to me. That was her whole story. And it was a story that I needed to tell. That was my responsibility, to tell this story. In 1910, my grandmother left the reservation and went off to another government boarding school. This time it was in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, a long way from Natawash. This school was the model school in the nation for American Indian boarding schools. Carlisle School was founded in 1879, and what it was an abandoned army post in Pennsylvania. The goal of Carlisle was to strip all of the culture from Indian students. These institutions prepared the boys for manual labor and farming, and they prepared the girls to be domestics. The boarding schools, some people say, oh, some boarding schools were better than others. There may be a hint of truth there, but ultimately, whether the boarding school was on the reservation or off, they carried out the government's mission. And that was to restructure the Indian students' minds and personalities by severing the children's connection with their families and their tribe. That was their purpose. They were to speak only English. They were to dress in American style. They were to only eat American foods. They were to worship the Christian God in the American way. And they were to live in American-style houses. You can go to a website, the Carlisle Indian School's website, and you can search for student records by names. I went and searched for my grandmother. These are some of the documents, just a few of the documents that I could find. They even have personal letters from her parents asking permission of the school to allow their children to come home on holidays, to come home during the summer months. They had to request permission to see their children. My grandmother was student number 3,981. She attended school